Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. So welcome to the show, Melissa. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm excited to chat with you.
So we're here to talk today about your Curiosity travel guides. Tell us a little bit more about how you came up with the idea and a little bit more about what they're designed for.
Absolutely. So my Curiosity Travel Guides series is a interactive workbook, guidebook for families with young travelers, young adventurers between the ages of 8 and 12 who are embarking on a journey to explore the great cities of the world. And currently, the Paris book and London book are out and available in stores and online. And am finishing up Rome. I've got Barcelona, Tokyo, and a couple other cities on deck. But the idea for kind of the spark for these guidebooks came from when my husband and I were taking our 3 kids on their first trip to Paris. And I put together just a little, kind of like clip art, spiral bound little book, so that as we were walking through the streets of Paris, walking through the museums and such, they would have something that would keep them entertained, engaged, and also kind of charting their trip. So I would say the main spark came from our first visit to the Louvre, when my kids were sprawled out on the floor of the Louvre, much to the dismay of the folks who are working at the Louvre. But they were sprawled out and, writing in their books, drawing their own version of the Mona Lisa. And a couple of parents came up and said, "Where did you get those books? I would love to buy one." And I had that happen enough times when I would take my kids to, different cities, that I knew that I was on to an interesting idea. So I expanded it into sort of a real product, something that goes beyond just my kids. And it's a way of not only keeping the kids engaged and interested, but also helping the adults in the group figure out a way to best interpret these cities. Museums for kids between the ages of 8 and 12 can be tricky. So can really long dinners after a long day of travel. So my guidebooks seek to address that. And also, the coolest part is at the end of the trip, you have already no Wi-Fi, no printing, no nothing needed. You have a keepsake that shows sort of the memories of your trip that you just took.
So true. It's such a great idea. And talk a little bit more about moving away from the conquer and consume mindset. Can you share how that philosophy shows up in your pages?
Absolutely. So I bring to these guidebooks and my creating of them kind of 3 different main experiences. One is that my background, I was on the faculty at University of Colorado for 15 years, where I taught and researched in the area of international and intercultural communication. What does it look like when you are entering into a culture that's not your own? What does it feel like when you're the outsider, or when designing these books? I bring my background as a researcher in international and intercultural communication, as well as my experience of being a mom to three active kids, as well as my experience of taking these three kiddos over to Paris for 2 years as an expat. And in my research, my academic research, as well as just spending time walking around various urban cities with my kids, I noticed that there is a tendency towards this consume and conquer approach to travel, and accelerated definitely by social media with the sort of like go, click, post, and race on to the next thing. And I saw, when we were living over in Paris, I saw so many families be like, okay, what are the things that we have to do? Because I want to do all of them before lunchtime, because then we're catching a train to another city that we're going to go. And, I want to see it all. I want to do it all, but I also want to do it like a local. And it just seemed that there was this frenzy that parents, when traveling with kids, can get themselves into. And even without kids, there is this tendency that we have when we travel of wanting to see it all, because we never know when we might, cross this path again. But I think there is a different way of doing it, kind of getting back to the real roots of travel, which is to slow down, explore, and pay witness to a different way of organizing your life. Maybe, it's, I know for me, going to a boulangerie was not something that was in my day to day life when I was living here in the US. Moving to Paris, it was fascinating to see what the role of the boulangerie is. It's not just going and buying a baguette. There's a completely different way of structuring one's life. And in these guidebooks, through a series of prompts and activities, really switching gears from that speeding and racing through everything and just documenting it with a quick picture. Instead, slowing down, keeping your phone, keeping your camera in your backpack, and instead engaging in a conversation with other tourists, engaging in a conversation with a shopkeeper, asking questions of your own group, like, I wonder why they are doing it this way. And, one of the things I think that is most valuable when taking kids between this age group, taking them on international travels, is not that they learn about the culture of New Zealand, or the culture of Japan or Italy or France. But to me, I think paramount to that is kids understanding their own cultural background. And I use the metaphor of a fish. Can a fish describe water? Well, a fish can describe water when it leaps out of its own fishbowl. So in these guidebooks, I frame travel as a way of getting out of your own fishbowl. And the first part of the guidebooks are activities and discussions and questions about being a tourist in your own town. If you were to tell somebody, okay, you're coming to my hometown, which for me, that would be Denver, Colorado. What are the things that you would suggest somebody to bring? What are the things you would suggest somebody to do? What's a postcard that you would create for your own hometown? And so getting kids into the idea of what it means to be a tourist. It's like, okay, Let's go visit a museum in your hometown. What are the things that you notice? Because then that way, then when they go over to Paris, Rome, Tokyo, what have you, and hopefully go through a museum, you've got some points of compare and contrast, and recognizing that we all live in interesting places that are worthy of exploring.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's such a great idea. And are there any specific Parisian spots or experiences in your guide that you think are especially transformative for young travelers?
Mm, good question. I would say that the thing that makes these books different from some of the other ones, there's great ones on the market, but these books don't tell you where to go and what to see. Instead, what I've done is, help design questions, ideas, and activities that for most of the top things. But it's more a guide of once you get there, what are the questions you can ask? I mean, for me personally, the Jardin de Luxembourg is one of is the top spot in Paris. But to me, the coolest place in Jardin de Luxembourg is not, the fountain, which of course is stunning. I don't need to tell you that, but it is the kids' playground, or it's the bocce ball, watching the old guys play bocce ball. It's, those places where, the playground for the kids, where you watch kids, and it's sort of like a little version of the UN, because there's kids from all over the world, kids speaking all different languages, but they all somehow figure out how to organize their own play. Or you go and you watch, the old guys playing bocce ball, recognizing that this is something that they've been doing for decades, and there's a whole dance to it. Um, but for me, the most transformative place really would be the lunch table, where, be it at a restaurant, a cafe, or a picnic. The most transformational part of travel is the conversations that the adults and the kids have. And I oftentimes get requests like, well, instead of this guidebook, can you just put it on an app? And again, I'm not anti-app whatsoever. I use Google Maps as much as the next person. But these are not a digital pacifier. Instead, these guidebooks are sort of a conversational amplifier. And that's why I call them interactive. Not that they are digital or online, but they're interactive in that it's a conversational guide for the adults and the kids to have together. So I think the best tourist spot, shall you say, is the cafe table.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I like the remark about the UN playground. Every kid is figuring it out in their own little culture and their own little age.
Uh-huh.
And how do you balance fun and education while keeping kids entertained and subtly teaching them about cultural depth? I mean, that's a lot going on there.
Yeah, it is a lot going on. And in the guidebook, there's several pages at the back that it's a letter to the parents. And it offers, some ideas, some discussions, some things to think about in order to further the conversation about cultural differences. And, now more than ever, I think we need it. And how is it that we talk with, through, around, across differences? And that can be language, that can be belief systems, whatnot. But these guidebooks were designed to avoid the death march. And, I one time took a group of university students for a study abroad program over to Paris. This is not designed to be a study abroad curriculum, shall we say. But there's little bits and pieces that I've designed and adapted to sort of the understanding and the educational level of an 8 to 12-year-old. How can you understand culture? And kids can pick up on it a lot easier than adults, like all things. They, again, you put them in the playground at Jardin de Luxembourg and they'll figure it out. They'll do it on their own. Um, but I would say between the letter to the parents to help them with a framework of here's a way to approach culture. Here are the various ingredients to culture. So I've taken all my research and kind of put it into little bite-sized pieces that make it easy for the kids to understand as well as the parents. But one of the funny little stories that somebody who had used the guide on their trip to Paris in my guide, in the letter to the parents piece, I put in there a piece of how, traveling with kids, it's heavy lifting. Traveling internationally is hard. And then you add on traveling with young kids and it gets, it gets a couple more layers of complexity to it because of energy level and, different people's moods. And some people love to travel and be outside of their fishbowl. Other people just don't like being out of their own fishbowl. And, no judgment there. So my friend said to me, she had used this book with her daughter. And in the letter to the parents, I say, if at some point in your trip, if you're not bickering or if you're not, crying, then, consider yourself very, very lucky, because if you're crying on the platform of the metro because you're so stressed and frustrated, don't worry, you are in good company. And she said she found herself and her daughter crying on the platform of the metro, and she burst out laughing. She's like, well, I guess this is okay. This happens. And it's true. I try to weave in a lot of humor and levity into the guidebooks because, we don't have to be serious when we're talking about international and intercultural communication or international travel. Getting back to the real purpose of travel. And one of the first activities I have, the adults and the kids do, because it can be parents, grandparents, really cool aunts and uncles, um, and I've also had folks who have, groups of adults taken the books, and they said, that, yeah, we actually had a lot of fun. We, popped open a bottle of wine and we drew our own postcards. And so it doesn't have to be just for kids, but I would say, my target audience would be 8 to 12-year-olds. But one of the things that I suggest doing is, okay, the five things that you really want to accomplish? And why are you taking this trip? Is it a have to? Is it well, I think I should, my kid's 12. I want them to see the top of the Eiffel Tower type of thing. But to be very intentional about how and why you're traveling. I think that is, that is the to-do list item that we frequently overlook. We get so busy focusing on which travel cubes and which away suitcase and what carry-on and, how many ounces I am allowed to take type of thing. And we forget that the most important question is what am I hoping to get out of this trip and why am I taking it?
Definitely. I think we, like you said, we get so wrapped up in, documenting, we forget why we're even there. Maybe you're
Yeah.
there to document.
Right. Maybe you're there to document. Absolutely. Yes.
And
And
what
yeah.
advice would you give to parents or anyone really who wants to bring more creativity into how they travel?
Besides the packing cubes, I know. I feel like I should be on a marketing team for packing cubes because I do swear by them. Um, what advice is to go offline and to embrace the boredom. And I think you can see almost every day a different article, a different discussion about the importance of boredom and the relationship between boredom and creativity. So keeping your phones, your iPads and such in your backpacks while you are having lunch, having dinner, having breakfast, whatnot. And if people get restless and, start to twitch because they're not snapping enough, on Snapchat, that's okay, because that's where the creativity is. And particularly for this age group of young kids, they don't spend a lot of time away from their screens, with how our classrooms are structured now. And again, screens play an important role. And you can go without screens on a vacation. And I've done screen-free vacations, and I've done the death march and the document and the fine. You can have your screens as much as you want. And I'll tell you one thing, my kids and I both remember the times where we were offline for the majority of the trip.
Yeah, it was probably more meaningful in a lot of ways, and you remember more.
Exactly. And, I think, Instagram is a fantastic way of, documenting your trip, and then you can go back and you can see it and such. But you can also do all those posts when you get home. But I designed these guidebooks to, in essence, post, if you will, but post with the guidebook. So they're great because they are the perfect, what I think is the perfect size, not too big, not too small, and with a spiral bound binding so that you can flip it over and it can fit on a small table. And also the paper and the cover are durable enough that you can write on your lap if need be, or, if something gets spilled on it, it's not the end of the world. So using the questions in here, the what's your itinerary, or, what are three weird things that I saw today, or what are, the 10 new foods that I tried when I was in London. Those types of things can help spur creativity. And I think once we understand the game of asking good questions, then the rest will take care of itself. So what I have found with my own kids or taking other young people around the world, when you kind of point them in the direction of, okay, what's going on here? We are wired to be curious, but sometimes we put too many barriers in between that. We're wired to be curious and we're wired to be creative. But if we have too many speed bumps, it's just easy to defer back to our Apple News feed.
It's so true. No, I think that's really a valuable thought to kind of sit with.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And so
it's
how
just, yeah, being creative for me is uh, it's about being awake and noticing the interesting things in our day-to-day life. And when you can practice that in such an obvious place like, Paris, Rome, Tokyo, what have you, you can then bring those skills home. So I mentioned how the first section of the guidebooks are about being a tourist in your own town. Then the last section of the book is, okay, now what? How do you bring these learnings home? How do you bring this approach to asking questions, to being creative in your day-to-day life back home? Travel changes you, and it's supposed to. So what are you going to do differently or more of as a result of this experience? So it's giving a template for the parents also to help bring those learnings back into everyday life, because so many of us, not only is it the conquer and consume, but then it's the race to get home, race to get the laundry done, the suitcases put away, and get back to our regular life, which usually involves, a lot of working, of errands, of racing around. And this guidebook is just helping to kind of pump the brakes a bit on that.
Definitely. We could all use it, not just the
Yeah.
kiddos.
Exactly. Well, and I would say most people, most U.S. Americans, particularly U.S. Americans who are going to Europe from an urban-ish area, will say the thing that they wish they did more of when they came home is to slow down, particularly around meal times.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. That's
Mhm.
a nice thing to do. I mean, I remember as a kid always eating dinner with my family every night, and my teachers would drive by and see us in the window and be like, "Wow, you eat dinner with your parents every night."
Mhm.
Like, just
Yeah.
actually sitting together and having a meal and putting the screens away.
Exactly. Yeah. Or, not having dinner with the TV on, or, with the screens. They may not be on the table, but they're in the pockets, buzzing and beeping and whatnot. So just letting the boredom happen, letting the quiet happen, and letting the conversation kind of begin to shine.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on. And where can people pick up these guides and learn more?
Absolutely. My favorite question. So, the website is probably the best place to get a copy of them. And the website is curiositytravelguides.com. And it's curiosity is Curio City, all one word. And you can also find the guides on Amazon, and there's several independent bookstores around the country where you can find them as well. And if you have any questions, just drop me an email. Always love to talk about travel, love to talk about how best to prepare and travel with young kids.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And we'll share all of that in the show notes, guys. So check it out, connect with Melissa, and thanks so much.
Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate having the chance to talk all things travel and
Thanks so much for
creativity.
tuning in to La Vie Creative. You can find more information on MissParisPhoto.com. And if you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word for all my creative guests. We have the power to help them to keep doing what they love. See you next time.